go. So you should get your prompt now, and let's see, we're up to 7. Still not quite a quorum, but we're getting there. So it feels like spring is in the air. I don't know what it's like where you are, down, I guess, down below the equator. Marcia, you're moving into fall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, a bit colder now.
Yeah, we're of course get just the opposite. It's beginning to warm up, and we have a couple of very nice days on tap
Great.
this week. Yeah.
The snow has melted already?
Yeah, the snow's all gone. That doesn't mean there won't be more snow. There was one year in 1987, there was almost no snow throughout all of the winter. And then in early April, the first week and a half of April, we had 2 large snowstorms, including a foot of snow in one day, which was the record amount for one day until a couple of years ago. So you can never quite tell for sure what's going to happen. Kyle and Jackie, hello there. Good, you're with us. Julia, welcome. Let's see. Oh, the numbers are getting better. That's good. We're up to 10. Well, 9 plus me. I don't really count, I guess. Wait one more minute and then we'll get started. We were just talking about everyone's favorite topic, namely the weather. And as I think it was Mark Twain said, everyone talks about the weather, but no one does anything about it. Not that it's within our power to do so, but yeah. Okay. Well, I will share my screen and start with my, no, you don't want to see that, but I'll start with my, yeah, there we go. My usual revelatory beginning. I will show you my t-shirt. This is in honor of, or following on Bethany's lecture on Monday, on Wednesday, sorry, last week, where she talked about and here you can see the t-shirt up close. She talked about runic, Anglo-Saxon runic inscriptions. And I don't have an Anglo-Saxon runic t-shirt, but this is Icelandic runic forms. The runic alphabet was alphabet that was an offshoot of the Greek alphabet, and it was developed amongst the early Germanic peoples, and was used for writing some of the early Germanic languages like Old English, mainly in inscriptions and various objects. So this one here is a pin that was enlarged, of course, a pin like to hold, like a safety pin that holds clothes together, or a sleeve, or cuffs, or something like that, and it is inscribed with runic signs. This is from, I think, the 8th century. Some of the Anglo-Saxon runic inscriptions are much earlier than that, 5th or 6th century. And this is a replica of a very famous runic inscribed drinking horn. It was made out of gold, so it's very valuable, and it has an inscription on it that I can share with you if you hang on just a sec. Wikipedia, as always, is very handy for these sorts of things. If you can see this here, this is the inscription. This is the the how it looks in runes, and the inscription. This is mentioned in the Hawk and Joseph textbook also, but it says ek Cleogastes Holtiav Horna Tawido. I Cleogastes Holtiaz made the horn, and it was the drinking horn. So this is a typical kind of inscription that one finds on objects. Either this belongs to me or this was made by me is a fairly common thing to see on inscriptions. And this ek is the word for I, actually cognate with Old English ich and German ich, if you know German, Danish yeu, and horna, word for horn. So there's some recognizable pieces in there. And these are replicas, but it's from the Danish Museum, but this is what they look like. And I think, and this is my t-shirt. So this is the t-shirt du jour, as you can see. Let me get rid of that, and we can move into the more contentful stuff. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so this is just some runic. There, you'll hear, just to finish on the runic side of things. There are different variants around the old Germanic world, but they share some basic shapes and such. I guess you can see. Yeah, so some of these shapes are similar across various of the old Germanic runic alphabets. It went out of use by about the 8th or 9th century, giving way to the Latin alphabet. We find inscribed stones, but interestingly, it's also the Romans, in their descriptions of what was going on in the Germanic world, refer to the runes as also being written on chips of wood, and this is sometimes invoked to, even though we don't have any inscribed pieces of or there are not very many. There are some in Scandinavia, but the shapes of the letters are, notice they often involve angled slashes, and that would show up very well across if you cut across the grain of a piece of wood, the slashes would show up. So most of these, not all of them, but most of them involve angled cuts of some or slashes of some sort that would explain the shape of letters. And the fact that we don't have very many wooden inscribed entities is just explained by the fact that wood generally doesn't survive all that well, except if it's underwater, interestingly. So inscribed stones would, of course, last much longer. But the German, I'm sorry, the Roman descriptions of old Germania with references to writing on wood can help explain the shape of some of these letters. Okay, so that's today's t-shirt excursus. Do I still have all of you? Yes, I guess so. And you're all seeing this successfully? Yeah, okay, good. What I would like to talk about, we're at a sort of the fact that we had the problem set due today. I'll try to get that back to you on Wednesday, and I'll go over it on Wednesday after I've had a chance to see how you've done with it. But this problem set sort of closes off the first phase of the course, and we'll move. We've been spending a lot of time on, obviously, as you know, on the comparative method and on matters of sound change. That's why the problem set focused on those topics, because that's what we've been spending our time on mainly. But I see there's a question in chat or something. Oscar and perhaps others are having difficulties getting into the Zoom meeting. Huh. Kyle. Okay. I wonder why that would be the case. Kyle, if I'm just to verify, so Oscar texted you or something about you, or emailed you?
Yeah, we have a group chat, and he just he's asking if anybody else is having trouble getting in. So I'm assuming he's probably not alone.
Yeah, I don't see any email about that. I'm hesitant to shut the meeting down and open it up again, because others might maybe you could suggest that he try. Oh, there he is. You made it, Oscar.
Hi, sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. Were there any others that you know that were having problems? I see how many people here. One.
Seen before.
How many are there altogether? I don't see the participants list. Let me stop sharing. 12 students and me out of 16. One of whom wouldn't be, is out of 15. That's about par for the course. I think there are usually a few people who aren't there. So maybe it was just a transient issue with you, Oscar. But anyway, welcome to the rest of you to the class. Never quite sure what's going on with Zoom. Sometimes it's, well, you guys have more experience probably than I do with its quirks, but I've had enough knock on wood, runic wood for good luck. Knock on wood. I hope my troubles with Zoom are behind me. I was detailing some of them to my son the other day, who's teaching also by Zoom, and we were complaining about things that could go wrong, and then remembering how much worse they could be in principle. So mostly it seems to work, and I guess that's you get tricked when things are going smoothly. You think, oh, they'll always be like this, and then sometimes life intervenes, as it were. Okay, so I'll go back to sharing screen and assume that you all are with me. What I was just saying is that we're at a sort of inflection point in the course, where we've been spending a lot of time up till now on the comparative method and on other methods for describing sound change and accounting for sound change. And that's why the timing of the problem set was such that it sort of closes off, or it will on Wednesday after I go over it with you, kind of close off that phase of the course, and we'll move into other topics, because there's more to language change than just sound change, of course. But the comparative method, we'll see that the methodology that we've developed for the comparative method will carry over into looking at morphological change and semantic change and syntactic change even, and as well as some areas outside of linguistics proper. So we'll see some examples of comparison of cultural details that are found in the cultures associated with different related languages. But I thought it would be good to just make sure we're all on the same page about the basis for the comparative method. I don't think we ever actually went through this in an explicit way, but it's been said, and I got this from my my mentor, Calvert Watkins, whom I've mentioned a few times to you, that the comparative method, I don't know where he got it. I don't know if it was original with him, but it's a nice formulation of the foundation for the comparative method. And that is that it rests on one fact and one hypothesis. We may have mentioned this before, but I don't think we went through it systematically enough. And the fact is that there are correspondences of form between and among certain languages that are so numerous, systematic, and precise as to exclude chance, borrowing, and universality as their cause. The hypothesis from that, once you can rule out chance, borrowing, and universality, the hypothesis from that that you're left with is that these correspondences are the result of these languages being related. We say genetically, or you remember I said that we also use the term now genealogically related, so as not to make for confusion with biological genetics and DNA type relationships. But they're said to be genetically or genealogically related, deriving from a common source, a so-called proto-language or parent language. And if you remember, I think I do remember mentioning this in class. I said that there was a student who used this this particular formulation of things, that saying that there are really 4 and only 4 ways in which you can find similarities across different languages. They can be due to chance, to borrowing, universality, or genealogical relationship. And I think I told you that, that a student who took this class some years ago pulled that line of reasoning out in an English literature seminar that she was attending, and that student was Bethany, who you heard talking about the history of English last Wednesday. And she told me once that in this class on literary analysis, someone was talking about similarities between 2 different authors, and she said, well, really, you know, what you have to bear in mind is that there are 4 and only 4 ways in which you can find similarities with the authors in question. The similarities could be just due to chance. They happen to write about similar themes. They could be due to borrowing. One author deliberately modeling themselves on another another author, and that accounts for the similarities. Or they could be due to universality. That is, there's something about the topic that they were writing on that lends itself to particular motifs or the like, and that's why you find the similarities. Or failing that, they could be due to the equivalent of genetic genealogical relationship. That is, say, one of those authors studied under the other, and therefore learned from them. So there's lineal descent in a way. Or that they both studied with the same master, and they show the similarities because of their shared earlier experience. And when she explained that in the seminar, one of the students said, "Gosh, where did you learn that? That's really, really great reasoning." And the lesson is that the kind of reasoning that we develop, the kind of critical thinking that we develop in trying to make sense of these linguistic parallels that we find across different languages, really has a basis in sort of reasoning more generally that can be applied to other kinds of enterprises, other kinds of investigations. So because you now know who she is, I thought it was worth mentioning that again, because I seem to recall having said that or described that experience at one point to you earlier in the class. So what does it mean to rule out chance, universality, and borrowing? That's what I want to spend a little bit more time on today, because I don't think we've done this sort of systematically enough, even though it's covered in the textbooks. What I have here are a couple of sort of stock examples that you find in the literature about chance similarities between languages. So in Malay, the word for eye is mata. In modern Greek, the word is mati. And they look very similar, and they have the same meaning. So of course that sort of draws the attention of people, even if they're not linguists, if they know the two languages, they're struck by the similarities. But if you go back, we actually know the history of the modern Greek word. If you go back some 2,000 years to the Greek of the New Testament, mati derives from the earlier omation, where the om here that I've underlined is the root of the word, has to do with seeing or with eyes or vision in general. And in Malay, based on sight-related words in other Malayo-Polynesian languages, it looks like the ta is the root that means sight, and the ma is just derives a noun. In the case of omation, then om is the root, and the ma actually is a noun forming suffix, and the tion is actually the mat part. I guess I should put it that. And the eon is a diminutive suffix. So it's the little thing you see with, basically. But as far as we know, when you go back 2,000 years in Malay's prehistory, the form mata was mata way back when, whereas mati shows the results of various kinds of sound changes that have eliminated the final syllable and eliminated the initial syllable, and you're left with mati from that. So when you go back to earlier stages, the word for eye in Malay and modern Greek are actually quite different, and that tells us that it's just the chance developments of these sound changes involving initial syllables and final syllables in Greek that have led to this convergence. That's what we mean by chance convergence between two languages. If you are a speaker of modern English and you know the word bad, you also know the word in modern Persian and in Farsi, which is bad, a slightly different vowel, but basic, but close enough for our purposes. And that's a striking similarity, and which has not escaped people's attention. But again, if we do the same kind of exercise, same kind of reasoning, and look at the earlier history of these words, it turns out that they were quite different early on. So the modern Persian word derives from an earlier form, from the Middle Iranian form, wad with a w. And the English word bad has two possible sources that have been proposed. Either this word badal in Old English, meaning an effeminate man, so there was a semantic shift there, pejorative associations to the word. Or it could have been from a participle baded or kabaded, meaning captured, again with some semantic shift. But if you go, so again, the point is, if you go back in time far enough, you find that there would be no basis for saying that the B of English corresponds to the W of earlier Middle Iranian, and therefore the developments that have led to this convergence or this striking similarity are really just a matter of chance. The chance events, these chance sound changes and other reshapings of the words just have accidentally led to this similarity. And you can find sometimes cases that are where the geography is, even if the prehistory isn't well known, the geography is sort of rules them out. So in Istro-Romanian, a Romance language spoken in the northern part of the Adriatic Sea, this peninsula between Italy and what is now Slovenia or Croatia. The word for hand is mara. The vowels aren't exactly right, but this is close enough. And in Bardi, which is an Aboriginal language of Australia, the word for hand is mara. So you can find these similarities. We know actually that mara comes from Latin manus. And so if you go back in time, earlier stages, earlier history of Mara in Istro-Romanian, it shows more difference from the Bardi word than what we see in the modern forms. Now, can anyone think of sort of the mathematics that would lead to these kinds of just chance events, these chance convergences across different languages? I know that some of you have a math background, and I'm wondering if anyone can kind of, as we say, do the math and think of anyone want to try that? I'll give you a few hints, but
I mean, there are like thousands of words and there are thousands of languages, so it's sort of inevitable that you have like collisions like this.
yeah, thank you. Oscar's a math major, so I was actually hoping that he would chime in. Right, so there are, every language has thousands of words, probably hundreds of thousands of words, but let's say 100,000 words as sort of a rough estimate. There are some 7,000 attested languages, and there's one other factor that plays a role in this sort of chance convergence. That's the number of distinct sounds that we find in a language. Typically, it ranges between about, well, I think the lowest is Hawaiian with 13 distinct sounds, and there are languages that have 100 or more, but the typical language has about 40 or 50 distinct sounds. And they tend to be selected from a relatively restricted set. There's only so much that you can do with the physical apparatus of the vocal tract. Even though in principle you can make very fine distinctions, in reality, languages tend to gravitate towards certain classes of sounds, labials, dentals, velars, and so forth, nasals and such. So that a third factor that gives you the sort of math behind it is the large number of words in a language, the large number of languages, and the relatively small number of distinct sounds. So that, especially if we restrict ourselves to monosyllables or two-syllable words, I'm not a mathematician, but I'm hoping that Oscar will give me the thumbs up on this. If you multiply the number of languages by the number of words and then restrict it by the number of relatively small number of sounds and restrict it to monosyllables and disyllabic words, you're going to get some chance convergences, and that's exactly what seems to be the case with these and other examples. We'll see a few more later on in the after this when we move on a bit. It's also the case, and this is where our notions of regular sound change come into play. It's also the case that there are not regular correspondences between Malay and modern Greek that involve M and T, for instance. And that's another, if they aren't part of a consistent pattern, then it stands out as something that's likely to be due to chance. So and this, of course, is what we have spent the last several weeks focusing on, is the regularity of sound change and what it can tell us. And it's the if you remember the hang on a sec. Remember the definition that I gave for regular sound change. All candidate forms, once it's formulated appropriately, particular environment, the sounds warranted, and so forth. No grammatical conditioning, phonetic factors only. So that means that the can I get this out of the way here? Thanks. Yeah, so when we then come back to there we go. There we go. And then come back here, and we see that if there are not regular correspondences, if the M to M that you see in the word for I between Malay and modern Greek, or the medial T if those aren't part of regular sound correspondences, then there's no reason for thinking that that these are could really be indicative of a genetic or genealogical relationship. So also with we know that the B of again, based on what we know about the regular correspondences between English and Persian, the B of earlier English should not correspond to a W of earlier Iranian. So this then gives us a basis for thinking of that there can be chance similarities, and we can rule them out by, well, what would an attention to regularity of sound change, what would that allow? How would we use that to rule out chance? What additional data do we need to be able to do that? Remember what we said here about correspondences of form that are so numerous, systematic, and precise. How do we get numerousness or numerosity? And how does that tie into the notion of to my invoking regular sound change here?
Having a lot of data and a lot of
Yeah,
correspondences.
right. So if we have a lot of data, and then we can actually see, okay, there really are no systematic, numerous instances of M and M corresponding. It's just a matter of this one word that also reinforces the idea that it's just a chance event that leads to the similarity rather than anything systematic. Now, what do we mean by universality in talking about the potential for parallels between different languages? What is universal about the human experience with language, or the human experience with the world as it is reflected in language? Anyone have any thoughts? Well, let me show you some words that look very similar in different languages. So here we have Romanian how, Macedonian avav, Turkish hav, Finnish how, Arabic how, Hebrew how, Hungarian vow, Tagalog ow. Anyone know what these mean? What these words mean? You actually can probably figure it out if you just listen. Perhaps anyone want to take a stab at that?
Can I guess?
Yes, of course. That's what I'm inviting you to guess.
Is it a dog barking?
Yes, this is the dog noise. So if you're a speaker of Romanian and you're making a dog sound, you go how. If you're a Macedonian, you go of. See, if I pronounce it that way, then it sounds a little more if you're Hungarian, it's vow, and so forth. What's going on here? Why what is the relevance or the irrelevance of these similarities for our enterprise in historical linguistics? Do they tell us anything about the history of the languages involved? Anyone? Well, if I told you that these languages are Hebrew and Turkish are related because of they both have the same word for a dog noise, what would you say to me? Would you find that to be a compelling argument? Okay, Kyle, why not?
Because they're iconic sounds, so
Yeah,
they're trying
exactly.
to represent it.
Yeah, they're words that we could call iconic. There's a technical term for this. Iconic means that the form, the meaning determines the form. And there's a more technical term that's used for these kinds of sounds that one encounters in the natural world, and that's onomatopoeia, which are words based on or evocative of noises in the natural world. And they are what would explain the similarities in the case of onomatopoeia, and that's really what we're dealing with here with these dog noise words. What would explain the similarities? What's universal about it? Why am I talking about this under the rubric of universality?
Dogs make the same sound all over the world.
Pretty much so. If you've traveled at all, or even just around the U.S. Or into Canada or Mexico or wherever, dogs sound pretty much alike. There may be some local differences. The bird noises do show some dialects, as it were, across that are regional in nature. But for the most part, as best we can tell, there isn't a lot of differentiation in dog noises, particularly if you're trying to generalize over the class of dogs. I mean, the pitch of a Chihuahua's bark versus a Doberman Pinscher's bark will, of course, be different. But so what we're really talking about here is words that, as I say, are based on or evocative of words of noises in the natural world. They're really their similarities are based on on their being on the mimicry, really. So the similarities are based on mimicking the same entity. I added Bulgarian here, which is why is Bulgarian interesting for speakers of English? What's our conventional dog noise? Really? No one wants to answer this?
Oh, wow.
Thank you. Bow wow. Yes, exactly. So the bow, and while we know that English and Bulgarian are related, we would not want to base any claim about a relationship on the fact that Bulgarian says bow and English has bow in the noise for dog words, the word for dog noises. Okay, and you can multiply these across all of the different sounds of nature, the sounds of something breaking, the sounds of water splashing, the sounds of rain falling, all of these sounds. If you collect these words across different languages, you'll see that they're actually quite similar, not identical. So there are differences. I mean, look at the differences that we see here. The vowels are different. Sometimes the consonants are different. The Macedonian is interesting because we know that Macedonian lost H's, just like Cockney English. So that this av was maybe earlier hav, and therefore it looks even more similar to the Romanian and Turkish words. But even within related languages, so Finnish and Hungarian are related. The ow part is similar, but the H and the V are different. And Tagalog is lacking an initial consonant here altogether. So they're similar without being identical, but you can make sense of the similarity in terms of the entities that they're mimicking. And more generally, these are words that, to just focus on the term that Kyle used, these are words that are iconic in nature in that the meaning determines the form, whereas in the usual case, the relationship between form and meaning is arbitrary. That's the word I'm looking for. And this was yeah, this was an important point that was made by, I mentioned Fernand de Saussure in this class, didn't I? A week ago? Yeah, and I told you that he's actually your great grandfather in terms of the teaching of historical linguistics. But Ferdinand de Saussure emphasized this in his work on his course on general linguistics, that the relationship between form and meaning is arbitrary. What that means is that because the relationship is typically arbitrary, in cases where it's non-arbitrary, we can add to this, therefore, when there are parallels that are systematic, and I'll just say, etc., we, because of the arbitrary relationship between form and meaning, we need to seek a historical explanation. And that's where the genealogical or the genetic relationship comes into play. But with onomatopoeia, you don't need a historical explanation for the similarities. You can explain the similarities in terms of the entity that they are based on. The same holds for nursery words, words like papa, mama, and so forth, dad, and such, where they probably emerge out of the universal aspect of language acquisition by children, the kinds of sounds that they're able to make very early on in the language learning process, and the kinds of meanings that are salient for 2 and 3 year olds, the immediate kin terms, or words for breast and such are those are important for the child learning the language, and the range of sounds that they're able to produce at an early stage is relatively limited. So what we find with so-called nursery words is these are really conventionalized adult words for what children say early on, and then they get perpetuated by virtue of the fact that they are associated with the early stages of language development in children. But even there can be differences. So the Georgian word for Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, not the state in the South, the word for mommy is dede, which looks somewhat like our dad. It's still a kinship term, an immediate kinship term, but it's interesting that it's on the face of it, it looks more like our word dad than our word for mom. What I would like to do now, if there aren't any questions, is to let you guys spend a few minutes in breakout rooms. Let me give you, and looking at a document that I would like you to consider. Hang on a sec. Here we go. Here we go. This is it. So this is something called the Swadesh list, and what I would like you to do is to download it now or make it available. I'm going to assign you to breakout rooms. These are words that address the third issue of borrowing, and these we know that borrowed words can give us similarities between different languages. So even if we borrow a word like llama from Quechua into English, that doesn't give us any basis for thinking of a relationship between Quechua and English any more than the examples that were on the problem set, which were made up, but possible ones, like the word for trucha, for trout, from Spanish into Quechua, doesn't tell us anything about the genealogical relationship between the languages involved. But this Swadesh list is said to be a list of basic vocabulary items that are resistant to borrowing. So what I'd like you to do in your breakout rooms, I'll give you about 10 minutes to think about it, and then we'll reconvene. Think about what is basic about this vocabulary, what kinds of meanings are on this list. Do any of them seem to you to not belong to the notion of basic words? How universal are these concepts? These are actually concepts for which there are words in different languages, not necessarily the words themselves. Are there any that should be on the list? Can you think of any basic items that aren't there? And are these really resistant to borrowing? You may not be able to answer that, but you might have some experience with it. So let me move now to,
We actually don't have the file yet.
is that right?
Yeah, it's not in the chat or anything.
Oh, because I sent it to Kyle, not to all of you. Oh, that was my mistake. Thank you for letting me know. I will redo that and send it to everyone. Thank you. That was good. Swadesh. No, here we are. Okay, now do you all see it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's one of the quirks about chat that I've never quite internalized. Okay, so I will now put you, so you all see what you're supposed to do. Just look through this list and just discuss amongst yourselves the questions about what's basic, what types of meanings you see here, what do they all of them belong in your opinion, or there's some that shouldn't be there, and so forth. So we have 12 of you. So I will put you into 3 breakout rooms just randomly, and we'll reconvene in 10 minutes. So it's 11:57 right now. We'll reconvene at 12:07. I will send you a 1-minute warning when it's time to wrap up, and then we'll discuss, see what you come up with. Okay, everyone clear about what we're doing? Yes. Okay, good. So here we go. And you will disappear from my view, and you should be able to chat with your breakout room buddies. Good. Isabella, you you're supposed to be in room 2. Okay. Well, join it when you can. Pause. Okay, so you guys you were room 1, right? You're back. Oh no, you were room 3. Hannah, Ginny, and Kyle. Okay, good. There are 20 seconds to go. Okay, room 1 is beginning to be heard from. Julia and Jackie, good. Oscar, yeah, excellent. And room 2, where we have everyone back, Marcia and Rebecca. Yes, and Kenna, good. Okay, so I guess we've lost a someone, but we We have you all back. Okay, good. Well, let me share my screen and we can look at that again. And now you can see all my email. All my exciting email. There we go. So yeah, okay. So what did you guys come up with? Any thoughts? Why do you think these might be considered to be basic vocabulary meanings? So the words for these meanings in different languages, as what's basic about them and what might lend themselves to them to being resistant to borrowing. Anyone have any thoughts on that? You just had 10 minutes to think about it. No one had any useful thoughts?
Because
Well, how
that are in every
Yeah.
language.
Okay, well, are they in every language? So, but that would be one sense in which they're basic, but but what kinds of words are represented here? If you had to classify them by semantic domain, what kinds of words do you see here? What is this first group of words? I down through who?
Pronouns.
Pronouns, okay. And what's potentially basic about pronouns?
Core vocabulary.
Core vocabulary, okay. How so? Who is that? Is that Rebecca?
That was Hannah.
Hannah. Oh, tell me. So tell me what's core about them.
They're, like Marcia said, they're in every language specific to that language, and very general terms that you might learn in the beginning when you learn a new language. The very
Okay.
basic early words.
And what makes them basic? What function do they serve here in a language? What do pronouns allow you to do, among other things? But who gets to be a pronoun?
The person.
Person?
Language.
Yeah. Person. So okay. How are persons involved in language?
Can differentiate you from other people and other people from other people.
Okay, fair enough. So what dimension of basicness for language do pronouns speak to? If you were on a desert island, how and you were all by yourself, how many?
Wouldn't really need them.
You wouldn't really need pronouns because you wouldn't have anyone to talk to, right? So it's the social dimension of language, the fact that it's used for interactional purposes, and that is a universal about human language, namely the function that it's put to. It serves as a means of communication. That's one of the standard definitions of language. And if you're communicating, you're not just talking to yourself, you're talking to someone else. And therefore, as you were saying, the need to refer to other people, the need to differentiate yourself from someone else, from who you're talking to, and to differentiate that person from others that you're talking about, and so forth, is part of the human experience. So there's a basicness there. What about what other words here? How about these words here, from hair down to liver? Hair, head, ear, eye, nose, mouth, tongue, fingernail. What's basic about them?
Well, they're body parts
They're
that all
body parts.
humans have.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. So again, it's part of the human experience that you have hands, you have in the usual case, you have fingernails, there's hair, you have ears and such. Right. So it's part of so what makes them basic is that they're part of the common human experience across languages. Now, are there any here that struck you as maybe being as not really belonging maybe they weren't as basic as their occurrence on this list would seem to suggest.
Laos.
Laos? Okay,
Yeah.
that's down here. All right. So there are lots of places where there are no lice. Is that what you're suggesting? And therefore, it's not as basic to human experience. Is that? I just want to make sure that we are
I
all
think
on.
not for everybody, not for everybody. The men, especially, many of them don't experience that.
Okay, I've never seen a louse in my life, but
So yeah.
yeah. So okay, are there others here on this list that maybe seem to you to be less basic? Did any of your groups come up? Any of you in your groups come up with others?
We were saying maybe ice.
Ice. Okay, where would that be? Where would that be absent from experience?
If you live in a hotter climate where
If you live in a very hot climate, yeah.
where water doesn't freeze.
Exactly. How about?
But we need the ice to put on our drinks. Of course, it's part of our experience, life experience.
It is, but there are parts of the world where ice is not part of the human experience, not part of your interaction with nature. So that what about? Are there any others here? Did anyone else come up with another word that on the list or concept on the list that maybe wasn't so basic?
I would say sharp.
Sharp. Okay, how come?
Because we don't need it for our human experience. I don't think so.
No, ever fall on a rock and be jabbed with the point of a rock? And of course, here you have to abstract away from your individual experience. So I've never seen a louse in my life, but I'm willing to believe that there are lice in enough parts of the world so that they qualify as basic. I would personally maybe talk about flies instead of lice. What did I do here?
Yeah.
I just did something.
Mosquitoes, maybe mosquitoes, not
Mosquitoes.
louse.
Yeah. Oh, I lost the formatting on this. Oh well. How I did that, but anyway. Are there any words that should be on the list that aren't here? Some people have drawn attention to the fact that some of them are somewhat culturally bound. So I've wondered about so, for instance. Tying things together, okay, but sewing as a specific kind of way of binding, I don't know if that's necessarily universal or is culturally bound. The ones that are weather related, oops, I have no idea how I get back to the somewhere there's I did something to get rid of the formatting. I'm sorry about that. Body parts, all right, fairly straightforward. Forests, are they universal? Trees, I think, are even in the very dry parts of the world. There are trees, but forests imply a certain concentration of trees and certain weather conditions that I think at least are not universal across the human experience, though. And Rebecca agrees. Good, thank you. At least one of you there are with me. What about swimming? What do you need to be able to swim? Well, let me ask you first, do you consider water to be basic? And if so, why?
I mean, water in the sense that you need to drink water to survive, but maybe not like big body of water to
Yeah.
survive.
Okay. Yeah. So water in the sense of, yes, you need water in order to live. It's just that's a basic necessity of life, but you don't need it to be in a large body of water large enough to swim in. So swim maybe is something we might consider to be culturally um, more culture bound than some of these others. So this list has been criticized for exactly that reason. What's I think is more important here, and notice that they include also this is a list that came out of work by a linguist named Morris Swadesh in the 1940s and 50s. And he was trying he was working with an idea that you could gauge, gauge the time depth of relationships of between languages by looking at the how many of the basic words survived across the languages in question. And his idea was that these are words that not only were less likely to be borrowed, but resistant in a certain sense to replacement also. And yet we know that these words have been replaced. If you look at a word like hand, or a concept like hand, if you look across the just the languages of Europe, you find very different realizations. So there's the Manus group, that like French main, or Spanish mano. There's the Slavic type that we find in, say, Russian ruka, Polish Polish ronk. There's in Greek we find hieri. In in English and Germanic we find hand, Hand in German, so forth. So there must have been some replacement if we know all these languages are related, and yet they don't all have the same word. So there's been some lexical replacement here. No matter what you might take as the starting point for the Proto-Indo-European word for hand, there's been a change on the way into the Romance languages, into the Slavic languages, into Greek, or into Germanic. At least 3 of the 4 groups, Indo-European groups represented here, have undergone some lexical replacement. What the issue with regard to borrowing is essentially saying that that these words are, yes, they might undergo replacement, but they are more resistant to undergoing replacement by borrowing. And that's the last question here, that this was proposed as a way of gauging the time depth of relationships, but it could also be used to help rule out borrowing from as a reason for similarities between particular languages. So that if we are able, it's fair then to ask the question of, if they're basic, are they resistant to replacement? And in particular, are they resistant to replacement by borrowing? This is what Swadesh's idea was. There are actually examples that can be found of the borrowing of all of these words, all of these words, except for the word for hand, which does not seem to be, there don't seem to be any documented instances of the borrowing of the word for hand. So if we go back to this list here of the words for hand, we'll see that some replacement has taken place, but it's not clear in every instance. It's not clear what the basis for the replacement was. The word for the Slavic word for hand seems to come from a root meaning to reach, and what would be semantically reasonable about a connection between hand and reach.
Will you use your hand to reach?
Yeah, your hand as the reacher. It's the arm, or it's the final part of the reaching mechanism, if you will, that the body has. So what if we go to the extreme of saying that that the yes, replacement is possible, but these are, as basic items, they will be less likely to be replaced. That wasn't exactly what Swadesh was using this for, but we can, his list has been sort of repurposed, if you will. But if we go to the further extreme and say that it's not just replacement, but replacement by borrowing is less likely, then how would we operationalize that with regard to hand? Well, clearly some replacement has taken place, has occurred here. So whatever the starting point for hand is, it looks like the Slavic languages innovated a word meaning the reacher. So the hand as the reacher. But that would be an allowable, excuse me, an allowable kind of lexical replacement. But if you were, for whatever reason, you heard someone else from speaking a different language using a word for hand, and you said, "Oh, I like that word for hand, your word for hand. I think I will use it myself." The way you would have to operationalize this as a constraint against borrowing the word for hand is that even if you wanted to, you could not do so. And that to me doesn't seem to be, when you boil this down to what individual speakers would be doing, I think it's very hard to think of any resistance to borrowing as somehow being an absolute kind of constraint on what languages or what speakers can do with regard to borrowing. So the fact that that all of these, except for hand, show some examples of borrowing across languages. I mean, if we look at English, the word for stomach is borrowed. The word for vomit is borrowed. The word for what are some others here that are borrowed from English? The word for squeeze is borrowed, I believe. So English does okay, but there still are some that are borrowed, which means that it's not the word for mountain is borrowed. And there are, bad is one that we've talked about. That one has a native explanation, as we saw earlier. So even in looking at this list in English, you say that we end up with the idea that these are not. It may well be also that some of the pronouns are borrowed. The they in particular is often argued to be a borrowing from Old Norse into English, because the native English Old English word is hia, with a different onset, an H instead of an eth. So so the whatever resistance these basic items might show to lexical replacement, and possibly to borrowing cannot be an absolute. And therefore, we can only talk in terms of probabilities. If we say, if we're trying to rule out a chance universality in borrowing in order to make a claim about linguistic relatedness, genealogical relatedness, then all we can do with borrowing is really, if we're using the Swadesh list, is really come up with a probabilistic sort of argument. In much the same way that with chance, we developed a probabilistic argument based on the number of languages and the number of words, and restricted by the number of distinct sounds and so forth. So the upshot is the comparative method rests on this fact of these similarities. If we're at a point where we exclude chance, borrowing, and universality, we're left with the hypothesis of genetic relationship, and that's the tree-like descent that we've been using as our modeling for linguistic relationship. What I'll do, I'll stop here, and next time then we'll look at some of the, we'll flesh this out a little bit more just to get a better idea, and I will also looking at the some of the facts about chance. I'm sorry, developing an argument based on Indo-European languages for how one has to be careful in sifting out chance and borrowing and universality. And then we'll also look at the, by Wednesday, I hope I will have had a chance to grade all of your problem sets. So we'll talk about that. And then next week, we'll move into an entirely different realm. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you, as always, for showing up and being attentive. And I will see you then on Wednesday.
Thank
So on.
you.
Okay, bye-bye. I will stop briefly. Julia, can you stay on for just a moment? Okay, I'm going to stop recording.